Okay, hello there guys. I'm gonna be setting up the stream real quick. I believe it should already be set up mostly, so once that's done, I'll go ahead and just get started. And we'll be going through the week 4 recap and week 5 predictions. And since it's like week 5, there have already been some matches that have happened. Okay, let's go ahead and edit this to say week 4, 5. Just change all this stuff real quick. I think I forgot to change them last week, so. All right, then let's get started. So first off, week 4 recap. Starting off with the Swamperts beating us. The Snorlaxes in a 5-3. Actually, this is a little bit deceptive because it was actually 5-1 at one point, and then we picked up a win in UU, and then in OU, Roginald managed to beat Let's Rumble, Shall We, who subbed in for Frisso Ava, so it could have been 6-2 if Frisso played. Honestly, this was a pretty bad loss for me. It started with I lost to I'm Just Gray in like a game that was really unexcusable. I didn't play very well. I also got a little bit unlucky, but realistically, it shouldn't have been in that position because I made a few mistakes earlier in the game. I think that I have been having a pretty disappointing BLT so far, and hopefully I can bounce back this week. Updated Kanto beat Attribute in a very solid game. And then Dan Demand beat Fellyburn. Fellyburn had a pretty bad matchup. And let's see, Prince of All Otaku's also lost. I don't think his team was that good. And then he made a few misplays throughout the game. And Havens lost to Hangrini. So this was like one of our worst performances so far, but honestly, I'm not too worried for our team. Like we're still in a pretty good spot, and I'm more so concerned with just making playoffs, and we're at 3rd place right now. I think if we continue to have like a pretty decent or considering that the Swamperts have been extremely good and that they've really been beating up everyone so far, I'm like more okay with losing to them, seeing that they are a top team in the league, and really just focus on improving and pulling stuff together for playoffs. I think that if we do get to a playoff setting, then some of those matchups might change. If we go into a tiebreaker, I think we could definitely win that, and so I'm less concerned with how like losing that 1 week as opposed to moving forward and just thinking about how things will go from here. And I think some of those losses are more of an anomaly. Like I think I can beat I'm Just Gray most of the time. I think Fellyburn will win most of the time, and I think that some of our players had worse performances than usual. That said, I think that Swampers are definitely a tough matchup going into playoffs. So now the Rufflets and the Alakazams met up, and the Alakazams finally picked up their first non-loss right here with a tie. I do think that this means that unless they win out from here, they are probably screwed for playoffs. They don't really have that many points, and although the middle of the standings is kind of like muddled together, I do think that it's kind of becoming clear which are the playoff teams. And it looks like the Alakazams are most likely out. I think they do have to win out to actually make it to playoffs. Maybe they can squeeze in one more tie. But this has been an extremely disappointing week or performance from the Alakazams because of their expectations coming into the season as being like supposed to be one of the top teams. They have a lot of really good players, but just some of them haven't been performing as well as they would have liked, and then some others are like they haven't found any like new players really that have stepped up in their absence. So even though the Alakazams did finally pick up a tie with Ziri finally putting his first win on the board, um, I don't think it's enough for them to make playoffs. I think some of their performances have been very lackluster so far. But I do hope the best for them. Again, it's great to it would be great to see them make the playoffs, make a comeback. The Rufflets, on the other hand, the big win for them was obviously Pradhan over Ham. Pradhan having kind of an up and down season. He's had a lot of good performances, but he's also had a lot of mediocre performances so far. So it'll really be about his consistency going forward. And then Shadow Monster losing was also pretty big for them, as in it's not like it would have been, or as one of the players that should be performing on this team, Shadow Monster losing was a big hit for them. So moving on to the Goodras versus the Bolts, they also tied. The Bolts now being in the 5th slot with the Goodras right ahead of them at the 4th slot, and we play the Goodras this week. Star Rail versus Trade was a solid game from Trade. I think Trade has shown up to be one of those big purchases, 14K. And the Bolts have been riding that success to better than what most people expected record. Lightning also picked up his first win, and then Mikab continuing his solid performance with now being one of the few undefeated players left in the league. I believe, just Mikab, Cheese, and GXE being the only ones that have played all 4 games, and then Trade and Frisso. Also, Trade, Frisso, and APW all having, and Bandrizzolo all being 3-0. So definitely still some players that are undefeated left. And a lot of those names are kind of ones that we expected to be towards the top, except for APW, who has had a very good performance so far. Speaking of which, APW also picking up the win in UU versus Gun Gun J. SMB continuing his strong performance in RU. And this tie is like pretty good for both teams, I think. They're both happy to be kind of in the upper half of the standings, and they really need like a solid finish for both of these teams. The Goodra kind of being in a good spot already. They play us this week, so they really have to turn up their game for these last few weeks because they do play the top 3 teams in the league right now, being ourselves, then the Swamperts, then the Hadrians. And just by like record, those are the top 3 teams in the league. The Bolts, however, having already gone through the tougher part of their schedule, now play some of the teams that are actually below them in the standings, well, other than the Hadrians, who they play this week, and the Alakazams and Rufflets. So actually, the Bolts could be very much in a good spot to make playoffs if they like maintain a strong performance in these last few weeks. And then the last matchup was the Hadrians versus the Snoms, and their Hadrians continue their strong upward trend. Once again, I was wrong about the Hadrians because I had them rated as outside the playoffs, and a lot of people were actually correct. They did say that they would thought that the Hadrians would make the playoffs as a top team, and they are kind of in that spot right now. And props to them for making this run. A lot of their players that I didn't really have high hopes for really did step up, like Ewin, like Sensei Axu, like Confide, who did lose this week, but he's had a strong overall performance, or at least a lot better than I thought. And even the games he's lost, he's been competitive in. And Z-Strats I thought was not that good, but he's had a strong performance, whereas Mishimono has not had that strong performance. The Snobs also in that 6, 7, 8 or 5, 6, 7 slot So all these teams have to really turn it up at the end to really pick up their chances to make playoffs. And this bottom half of the standings, even seventh through second, are all just like one quote unquote win away, like 2 points away. So it's all very close. So let's move into this week's matchups. Starting with the Swampards versus Rufflets, I think Swampards being the best team in the league, they can kind of relax. I believe if they actually win this week, then they're probably mathematically in playoffs now. But I assume they will probably want to keep their strong performance for the remaining 3 weeks. They did give updated Kanto a break. I think they are in a position where they are trying to play all of their subs to get the requirements out and stuff. So Frisso is playing Blimax. I think easily Frisso is going to win this one. He's had a strong showing in OU so far, and there's no reason for me to believe otherwise. Pradhan versus Lugia Numer. I think Pradhan should win this one, seeing that he's had a pretty strong performance, but I hope that he does win this and shows that he can be one of those good players. He has been in the past. Like the main reason he had a lower price tag was, as we talked about before, it was the attitude issues. TMM versus Oras Mega. I think both players have had good wins and hard losses. I would favor TMM slightly here, but I think it's really, really close. Ars9 versus Dan Deman. I'll say that Ars9 traditionally should be favored, but he's been having a pretty rough BLT so far. I believe he is 1-3. I would still favor Ars9 slightly, but I do think Dan Deman could definitely do it if he plays well like he did last week. Bad player versus Skipcan. I think Skipcan is slightly better. Also favor him slightly. I think I'm Just Gray has been having a very good BLT so far, and he should win versus Excelsior, or at least he's been having an upward trend so far. I think TTT versus Shadow Monster will be a very close matchup, and I'll favor TTT slightly though. Hangwini versus Floss. I think Bandrizzle has been having a very strong BLT so far, and I'll favor him in this matchup slightly as well. In the Goodras versus ourselves, I think a lot of these matchups are actually pretty solid. Like both of these OU matchups, actually Deccan versus Attribute did already happen. Gun J versus Kather should also be pretty interesting. Solar Flare RO versus Fellyburn should also be pretty interesting, considering that Solar Flare RO has won in a few matchups that were unexpected, or I should say that Solar Flare RO was traditionally going to be thought of as worse. And because Solar Flare RO was like a prior Snorlax, and I've gone on record saying that his stint with the Snorlaxes wasn't really that good. But I hope Fellyburn does win this one. Myself versus Parivard should also be pretty interesting. And then SMB versus Cheese will definitely be the highlight match of this week. I'll go through all of my top 5 matches again this week, but that one is definitely one of them. Gorix versus Havens will be interesting, but Havens should be favored here after like strong performances overall by him so far. Cheese 555 versus Ham. Ham should definitely be favored. Twixtree should definitely be favored as well in that second OU slot. Ramolas versus Tectonic Destroyer can be very close. I think both players are pretty solid and have had both good and bad performances so far. Mac 3 versus SMGs. I think Mac 3 should be favored here as well. Ziri versus GW is also one of my highlight matches for this week. Should be very good. Plaz should be favored in LC, and Mishi should be favored in Devils, as long as no funny business happens. And then Maroon has already beaten Maki's Fox. This match is also really important for the Alakazams, and I hope that if they hope to win this match, then they should probably want to be winning all 5 of their top games, which is like both OUs, the UU, RU, and NU, seeing that they look outmatched in both LC, doubles, and they're already lost mana. The Bolts versus the Hadrians, Ewin versus APW will be an interesting match, with APW already being 3-0 and having like a very strong BLT so far. I think following all of these remaining undefeated players is always going to be like some of the most important matches in the tournament, or every week I should say. Abyssal Ruins versus Halaman, I think, is definitely favored to keeping it icy. Trade versus GXC is probably the highlight match because both of these players, Trade being, or actually, I believe they are both undefeated, yeah, and both having very strong performances so far this BLT. I think it'll be definitely very interesting to see how this one goes, especially because of like the implications of this week being like kind of a tumultuous meta, because it's kind of like between like stable states in the meta. So we'll see how this goes, but it'll be pretty interesting. Um, let's see. Then in NU, it'll be, or sorry, RU will be Epic Boost versus PCD. I'll favor PCD slightly, but I haven't had a huge amount of confidence in either of these people. I don't have a huge amount of confidence in either of these people. And I think RU also um, similar to UU, is in a kind of rough state. I think it less so than UU, but it is still kind of between metas because a lot of its Pokemon actually got stolen by UU in this most recent tier update, usage tier update, and that because of that, a lot of like staple RU Pokemon like Steelix are now gone, and also because of a round of bans, Pokemon like Drampa and Virizion, who were meta staples, are now gone as well. So this state in RU is like the state of RU right now is going to be very, very different from what we saw last week. So teams will definitely have to be more ready to like turn out these teams than prior weeks. NU Confide versus Not Mian. Not Mian had a pretty good performance last week, and I think that Confide didn't have or had a pretty good showing versus GW, but did pick up his a loss. But I would say I slightly favor Confide here to bounce back versus Not Mian. Like Mikav should be solidly favored in LC as being one of the best players in the pool, and he's done well so far. There's no reason to believe that he will lose here. And I think Z-Stretch should pick up a win here. He's proven to be very solid in doubles, beating players that around his level and below his level pretty solidly in the games to now. And then Dugza versus Richard Pepper, I think should favor Dugza pretty solidly as well. So with that said, that's about it for this week of BLT. Or actually, I should do the top 5 matches. So let's go through our top 5 matches. I think, once again, highlighting some doubles matches, TTT versus Shadow Monster should definitely be a really good game. Even though Shadow Monster is coming off of a pretty rough loss, I think that seeing how many top players are in this doubles pool, I almost always will highlight at least 1 or 2 of these matches per week, on top of the fact that I love watching doubles in general. On top of that, the other doubles match, SMB versus Cheese, is definitely going to be a big one. Cheese being one of the undefeated players left in the pool, and SMB being, of course, one of the best doubles players to ever play on Smogon. The other one, for the other ones, GW versus Ziri is definitely going to be an interesting match. GW having a pretty good performance so far in BLT, while Ziri is really struggling, but this match has a lot of playoff implications for both the Snobs and Alakazams. And these are 2 players that have been at the top of NU/lower tiers for a while now. So it's definitely going to be very interesting. For our 4th match, I'll highlight Ewin versus APW. I think both players have been playing very well in OU and UU for APW. And seeing that APW is 3-0, one of the last undefeated players left in the tournament, this match has a lot for personal stakes. And that is the same with my final match, definitely not the least important one, though. The GXC versus Trade final, or the final, God, I can't talk. The last highlight match that I'm going to be mentioning, GXE versus Trade. GXE being 4-0, Trade being 3-0, but both have had extremely good performances so far, and I have a lot of confidence in both of them against basically anybody else. But seeing that they are matching up against each other, it'll be definitely very interesting. And not to mention that I talked a little bit earlier about the shifting tiers of UU and RU. I think that the fact that it is going to be a different meta will definitely make this match a lot more interesting. So with that said, that's about it for me this week. If you did enjoy, oh, actually, quick announcement. It looks like I'm probably not going to be able to do the um, mid-season one recap with MJ just because stuff's happening and whatnot, and I don't really have time to do it with all the other stuff going on. But there will still be a post regular season one, and I'll try to get MJ on for that one. We'll see how the schedules line up. But also, I did start a podcast on other random stuff and IRL stuff, and you guys can check that out on my YouTube. There should be a link to that channel called Shitposting with the Lads within my channel. I'll leave a link in the description for those interested. It's just a podcast with some of my close IRL friends. So check that out if you guys want to. If not, I'll see you guys next week for another episode of BLT Recap and Analysis. And thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time.